Picture a stretch of coastline on the Ionian Sea. The water is turquoise, genuinely turquoise, the kind of color you expect from a screensaver, not from a real place. The hills behind it are steep and forested, dropping sharply to narrow beaches of white pebbles. The air smells of salt and wild herbs. Somewhere above you, a ruined castle perches on a cliff. Below, fishing boats bob in a small harbor. A family sits outside a cafe drinking coffee from tiny cups, not in any hurry at all. This is the Albanian Riviera, and almost nobody outside of Europe knows it exists. Now shift the picture. You're in a mountain valley in the north, dramatic, steep-sided, carved by a turquoise river running cold and fast between walls of limestone. Tiny stone villages sighting to the hillsides. The peaks above are snow-capped even in May. The hiking trails here rival the best in the Alps, and you will walk them in something close to solitude. And now, one more image. Scattered across the beaches and the mountains and the farmland and the city streets, half buried in soil or sitting in plain sight. Small, domed concrete structures. Thousands of them, hundreds of thousands, built by a dictator so paranoid, so convinced that every nation on earth wanted to destroy him, that he turned an entire country into a fortress. One bunker for every 4 Albanians. This is Albania. Small, extraordinary, and unlike anywhere else in Europe. Welcome back to Around the World in Half an Hour. I'm Ray, and this is episode 2. Last week we went to Afghanistan. Ancient, layered, extraordinary. This week, we stay in the A's, but we travel a long way, all the way to southeastern Europe, to the western edge of the Balkan Peninsula, right across the Adriatic Sea from southern Italy, Albania. It is one of the smallest countries in Europe. It is one of the least visited for decades. It was literally impossible to visit. It is also genuinely one of the most beautiful and surprising places on the continent. A country that spent 46 years sealed off from the rest of the world and emerged blinking into the light in 1991 with a culture so particular, so fiercely its own, that it still feels unlike anywhere you've ever been. We are going to talk about a medieval hero who held off the Ottoman Empire for 25 years and is still revered as a god among Albanians. We are going to talk about 170,000 concrete bunkers. We are going to eat baked lamb with yogurt that Taste Atlas once ranked as the best traditional dish in the entire world. And we are going to meet a country that gave us Mother Teresa, Dua Lipa, and one of the former CTOs of OpenAI, all from a population of barely 2.8 million people. Let's go. Albania is small. The whole country covers just about 28,748 square kilometers, roughly the size of the state of Maryland, or about half the size of Sri Lanka. If you drove its full length from north to south, you'd be done in about 4 hours. But within that compact space, Albania packs in a geography variety that countries 10 times its size would envy. The western edge of Albania faces the Adriatic Sea to the northwest and to the Ionian Sea to the southwest. These two coastlines have completely different personalities. The Adriatic coast is flatter, wider, with long sandy beaches backed by a low coastal plain. The Ionian Sea, the Albanian Riviera, is dramatic. Limestone cliffs drop to the sea. The water turns that impossible turquoise. Tiny beach villages sit at the bottom of steep switchback roads. This is Mediterranean Europe at its most cinematic. Moving inland from the coast, you quickly hit mountains. Albania is, in terms of terrain, an intensely mountainous country. The Albanian Alps, called the Accursed Mountains, Bjeshkate Namuna, in the far north are genuinely spectacular. Peaks topping 2,700 meters, deep river gorges, alpine meadows. The Valbona and Teth valleys in the northern Alps are among the most beautiful mountain landscapes in Europe. Full stop. The hiking here is exceptional. Trails connecting remote villages, crossing mountain passes, through scenery that genuinely competes with Switzerland or Austria, without the crowds and without the prices. In the center of the country, the terrain softens into highland basins and river valleys. The Shkumbin River runs roughly east-west across the middle of Albania and marks an old cultural boundary between the Gheg Albanians of the north and the Tosk Albanians of the south. These two groups have distinct dialects, distinct folk music traditions, distinct cultural temperaments. Standard Albanian is based on the Tosk dialect, but a northerner and a southerner will speak noticeably differently. The south of the country is where most of the drama is compressed. Gjirokastër perches above a valley in the southern highlands, a stone city of astonishing beauty. Berat sits in a river valley with Ottoman-era houses stacked up a hillside. The Ionian coast glitters below. And throughout all of it, in the mountains, on the beaches, along the roads, in the city parks, even in Tirana's suburban gardens, those concrete bunkers, grey, domed, everywhere. The major rivers are the Drin in the north, Albania's longest, and Vjosa in the south, which has become internationally celebrated in recent years as one of the last wild, undammed rivers in Europe. The Vjosa runs free for the entirety of its course in Albania, and in 2023 it was declared Europe's first wild river national park. That is a genuine environmental achievement in a continent where almost every river of significance has been modified or controlled. The highest point in Albania is Mount Korab at 2,764 meters on the border with North Macedonia. Albania shares borders with four countries, and every single one of those relationships is freighted with history and identity. To the north and northeast is Montenegro, a former Yugoslav republic with which Albania shares the mountainous terrain of the Accursed Mountains, and a small shared lake, Lake Shkodra. The relationship is cordial. To the northeast is Kosovo, the youngest country in Europe, which declared independence from Serbia in 2008 and is home to a population that is roughly 90% Albanian. The relationship between Albania and Kosovo is perhaps best described as fraternal. Two countries sharing one people, one language, one history. The idea of Albanian unity Across these borders is a powerful cultural and occasionally political force. To the east is North Macedonia, another former Yugoslav republic with a significant Albanian minority in its western regions. The relationship is complex, marked by ongoing discussions about minority rights and cultural recognition. To the south is Greece, the longest shared border and historically the most tense. There is a significant Greek minority in southern Albania, in a region Greeks call Northern Epirus. Territorial disputes and minority rights have strained the relationship at various points, though today it is broadly functional. Albania is a candidate for EU membership, and Greece, as an EU member, plays a role in that process. And across the Adriatic, barely 70 kilometers of sea away, is Italy. Not a land border, but perhaps Albania's most important international relationship. Italy is Albania's largest trading partner. Hundreds of thousands of Albanians emigrated to Italy in the early 1990s after communism fell. The cultural ties are deep. You can see Italian television from the Albanian coast, and Albanian children grew up watching it throughout the communist era. Albania's history begins with the Illyrians, an ancient people who inhabited the Western Balkans from around 1000 BCE. The Illyrians were fierce, independent, organized into tribal confederations, and sufficiently formidable that even Alexander the Great had to contend with them during his Macedonian campaigns. Modern Albanians consider themselves the direct descendants of the Illyrians, a claim that is broadly accepted by historians, making the Albanian people one of the oldest continuous ethnic groups in Europe. The Greeks established colonies on the Albanian coast, most notably Apollonia, founded in 588 BCE, which became one of the most important cities in the ancient Mediterranean world. Apollonia, at its height, had 60,000 inhabitants, produced fine olive oil, traded across the Greek world, and maintained a famous library. The great Roman orator Cicero sent his son to study here. Julius Caesar fought a major battle nearby during his war with Pompey. The ruins of Apollonia still stand in remarkable condition in central Albania today, an extraordinary open-air museum that most of the world has never heard of. The Romans conquered the region in the 2nd century BCE, calling it Illyricum. The area became a vital link in the Roman road network. The Via Egnatia ran from the Albanian coast all the way to Constantinople, and for centuries it was one of the most important roads in the world. After Rome came the Byzantine Empire. Then a period of complex medieval history involving Bulgarian kingdoms, Serbian rulers, and the gradual arrival of the Ottoman Turks from the east. And then came the man whose name every Albanian knows, George Kastrioti Skanderbeg. Skanderbeg is the Albanian national hero, full stop. Born around 1405, son of an Albanian nobleman, he was sent as a child hostage to the Ottoman court, as was the custom, and raised as a Muslim Ottoman soldier. He rose through the Ottoman military ranks, became an accomplished commander, and was given the Ottoman name Skanderbeg, Alexander the Lord, which Albanians Latinized as Skanderbeg. Then, in 1443, following an Ottoman military defeat, he defeated. He reclaimed his family's ancestral castle at Kruye, converted back to Christianity, and spent the next 25 years defending Albania against everything the Ottoman Empire threw at him. What Skanderbeg accomplished is almost impossible to credit. He repelled 13 Ottoman military campaigns. He defeated forces that vastly outnumbered his own. He united the fractious Albanian clans under a single banner, his banner, which carried a black double-headed eagle on a red flag. The same double-headed eagle that appears on Albania's national flag today. The Albanians fought and the Albanians held. When Skanderbeg died in 1468, the Ottomans finally took Albania. But they didn't take it easily and they didn't take it quickly. He delayed the Ottoman advance into Western Europe for a generation. And Pope Pius II called him the defender of Christendom. In Rome, in Venice, across Catholic Europe, he was celebrated as one of the great heroes of the age. And in Albania, he has never been forgotten. Albania was Ottoman for the next 4 centuries, from the late 15th century until 1912. During this time, much of the population converted to Islam, though a significant Christian minority, both Catholic in the north and Orthodox in the south, remained. This religious diversity became one of Albania's most distinctive characteristics. By the time of independence in the 20th century, roughly 70% of Albanians were Muslim, 20% Orthodox Christian, and 10% Catholic. But the dominant cultural identity was always Albanian above all else. There is an Albanian saying attributed to the 19th century nationalist Pashko Vasa. The religion of Albanians is Albanianism. The nation, not the faith, comes first. The Albanian national awakening in the 19th century culminated in the Declaration of Independence on November 28, 1912, proclaimed in the city of Vlore by Ismail Khemali, one of the great Albanian statesmen. Albania thus became the last country in the Balkans to break free of the Ottoman Empire, and independence came not a moment too soon. The Balkan Wars were already underway, and the great powers of Europe were redrawing the map. Albania's boundaries, as drawn in 1913, left large Albanian populations outside the country, in Kosovo, in North Macedonia, in Greece, a source of tension that has never been fully resolved. The 20th century was turbulent. After the First World War, Albania barely survived as an independent state. Italy, Greece, and Serbia all had territorial ambitions on it. An Albanian chief named Ahmet Zogu consolidated power in the 1920s, first as prime minister, then as president. Then, in 1928, declaring himself King Zog I. King Zog attempted to modernize Albania, bringing in European advisors and reforming the legal system. His reign ended when Italian fascist forces invaded in 1939. The Second World War brought occupation first by Italy and then by Germany. Albanian resistance was fierce and diverse. communist, nationalist, and royalist factions all fought the occupiers and also, tragically, each other. Out of this conflict, the communist resistance led by Enver Hoxha emerged victorious. Enver Hoxha, the name that defines modern Albanian history more than any other. He came to power in 1944 and ruled absolutely brutally, without interruption, until his death in 1985. 41 years. Hoxha was a committed Stalinist, perhaps the most committed Stalinist leader in world history. He aligned Albania first with Yugoslavia, then broke with Tito in 1948. He aligned with the Soviet Union, then broke with Khrushchev in 1961 when he considered de-Stalinization a betrayal of true communism. He aligned with Mao's China, then broke with China in 1978 when Mao's successors began normalizing relations with the United States. By the late 1970s, Albania had severed ties with every single country it had once allied with. It had no friends. It had no alliances. It was the most isolated nation on the face of the earth, a European North Korea. And in this vacuum, Hoxha's paranoia took physical form. Between 1967 and 1986, Albania built, depending on which estimate you use, between 170,000 and 750,000 concrete bunkers, one for approximately every 4 Albanians. They were dome-shaped, 1 to 2 meters high for individual positions, larger and more elaborate for command structures and shelters for the political elite. They were built into beaches, mountainsides, riverbeds, city parks, farmland, and back gardens. Hoxha's theory was total national defense. Every citizen a soldier, every patch of ground defended. The resources poured into these bunkers, concrete, steel, labor, were vast, and they came at the cost of roads, schools, hospitals, and housing that the Albanian people desperately needed. The bunkers were never used. The invasion Hoxha feared never came. He also banned religion entirely in 1967. Albania became the world's first officially atheist state. Mosques and churches were closed, converted to warehouses, or demolished. Practicing religion could result in imprisonment or death. The Sigurimi, the secret police, had informers everywhere. Neighbor spied on neighbor. Children were encouraged to report their parents. It was, by most measures, one of the most repressive regimes in European history. Hoxha died in 1985. His successor, Ramiz Alia, attempted managed reforms. They were not enough. By 1990, as communist regimes were failing across Eastern Europe, Albanian students began protesting. Hundreds of thousands of Albanians stormed foreign embassies seeking asylum. In 1991, free elections were held. Communism fell. But the transition was brutal. In 1997, a fraudulent pyramid investment scheme in which a huge portion of the Albanian population had invested their life savings collapsed, wiping out perhaps a third of the country's GDP and triggering what became essentially a civil war. The state collapsed. Armed gangs looted military arsenal. Bodies appeared in the streets. The UN deployed a peacekeeping force. It took years for Albania to stabilize. The Albania of today, stable, growing, EU candidate, NATO member since 2009, rapidly developing its tourism industry, is a remarkable achievement when viewed against that background. The Albanians have earned every inch of ground they stand on. Albania today has a population of around 2.75 million, making it one of the smaller nations in Europe. The capital is Tirana, a city of roughly 900,000 people that has transformed itself dramatically in the last 20 years. The colorfully painted buildings that former mayor Edi Rama, now Prime Minister, commissioned in the early 2000s as an act of psychological recovery after the grey communist years became internationally famous. Tirana today is vibrant, young, full of cafes and galleries and energy. Albania joined NATO in 2009 and began EU accession negotiations in 2022. The process of aligning with EU standards is driving significant legal, administrative, and economic reform. The economy has been growing steadily, GDP growth of around 3.5 to 4% annually in recent years, driven largely by services, tourism, construction, and remittances from the large Albanian diaspora in Italy, Greece, and beyond. Tourism, in particular, is booming. The Albanian Riviera has been discovered by European travelers looking for Mediterranean beauty at prices that Croatia and Greece can no longer offer. Tourism numbers have been growing rapidly year on year. The Albanian currency is lek, abbreviated ALL. 1 euro will buy you around 100 to 105 lek. By Western European standards, Albania is extraordinarily affordable. Excellent food, comfortable accommodation, and first-class natural scenery at a fraction of the cost of comparable destinations. Before we meet the remarkable people of Albania, there is one cultural institution we need to spend a moment on, because it is unlike anything else in European culture. The Kanun, specifically the Kanun of Leke Dukhajini, is an ancient code of customary law that governed life in northern Albania for centuries. It covers almost every aspect of human interaction: property rights, marriage, hospitality, conflict resolution, and most famously, blood feuds. Under the Kanun, an act of murder or serious dishonor creates an obligation of vengeance on the family of the wronged party. This is Jiak Marria, blood taking. The obligation passes between families, sometimes across generations. A man killed in a blood feud creates an obligation for his family to kill a male member of the perpetrating family, which in turn creates an obligation for that family to retaliate, and so on. The communist regime suppressed the Kanun entirely. After communism collapsed, it re-emerged in some northern Albanian communities, particularly in the 1990s, when the formal justice system had broken down completely. Families were trapped in feuds, sometimes keeping men indoors for years, unable to leave the house for fear of being killed. This has declined significantly in recent decades as the rule of law has strengthened and community leaders and NGOs have worked to mediate and end active feuds. But the Kanun remains a living cultural document, studied, debated, and in some places still referenced. There is, however, another side to the Kanun that is equally important: Besa. Besa means pledge or sacred word of honor. Under the Qanun, a host must guarantee the absolute safety of any guest in their home. Even an enemy, even a blood feud target, is inviolable if they are under your roof. During the Second World War, Albanian Muslim families sheltered Jewish refugees under Besa, protecting them at enormous personal risk. Albania was one of the very few countries in occupied Europe where the Jewish population actually grew during the war rather than being decimated. This is Besa. That is Albanian honor. Albania is a small country that has produced a quite astonishing number of significant people. George Castrioti Skanderbeg, we have already met him, but let us just sit with this for a moment. A man from a tiny mountain country in the 15th century held the most powerful military force in the world at bay for 25 years through nothing but tactical brilliance and sheer will. He is the reason Albania still exists as a distinct cultural and ethnic entity. His double-headed eagle still flies on the Albanian flag. Tirana's central square is named for him. There are statues of him across Europe. He is genuinely one of the great military commanders of the medieval world. Mother Teresa, born Agnese Gonje Boyaju in 1910 in Skopje to Albanian Catholic parents. She moved to Ireland at 18 to join a religious order, was sent to India, began teaching children in Calcutta, and in 1950 founded the Missionaries of Charity, an organization that today operates in 130 countries with thousands of sisters. She won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1979. She was canonized as a saint in 2016. She always identified as Albanian, always spoke Albanian, and Albania's main international airport in Tirana is named after her. A woman from an Albanian family in what is now North Macedonia spent her life serving the poorest of the poor in the streets of Calcutta and became one of the most recognized human beings of the 20th century. Ismail Kadare, born in 1936 in Gjirokastër, he is the greatest Albanian writer in history and one of the most important novelists of the 20th century. Writing under the communist regime, navigating censorship with extraordinary skill, sometimes publishing work that was both celebrated by the regime and secretly subversive of it. Kadare produced novels that have been translated into over 45 languages. His masterwork, The General of the Dead Army, written in 1963, was the first Albanian novel to gain international recognition. Broken April, set in the Northern Highlands and dealing with blood feuds and the Qanun, is perhaps his most accessible work for non-Albanian readers. A devastating, beautiful novel. Kadare defected to France in 1990, just before the communist regime fell. He was a perennial contender for the Nobel Prize in Literature and one of the great literary voices of the Balkans. He passed away in 2024, but his work endures. Dua Lipa, born in 1995 in London to Kosovar Albanian parents from Pristina. She is one of the biggest pop stars on the planet. Her album Future Nostalgia from 2020 was one of the best-selling and most critically acclaimed pop records of its decade. She sings in English, but she speaks openly and passionately about her Albanian heritage. She was granted Albanian citizenship in 2020. She is by most metrics, the most famous living Albanian in the world. When Dua Lipa talks about being Albanian, millions of people listen, and Albania's profile rises accordingly. Mira Murati, born in 1988 in Vlore, Albania, she emigrated to Canada and the United States, studied at Dartmouth, and rose through the technology industry to become the chief technology officer of OpenAI, one of the most consequential technology organizations in the world. She briefly served as its interim CEO during the turbulent boardroom crisis of late 2023. She has since left OpenAI to found her own AI company, Thinking Machines Lab. That the CTO of OpenAI came from a small Albanian city of 100,000 people is a remarkable fact about this small, often overlooked country. John Belushi. Yes, the Saturday Night Live and Blues Brothers, John Belushi. His father was an Albanian immigrant from the Korçë district of southern Albania. Belushi is one of the most beloved comic actors in American history. His Albanian roots are not widely known, but they are real, and Albanians are rightly proud of them. Albanian cuisine sits at a delicious intersection of Mediterranean, Ottoman, and Balkan influences, and it is far better than its international profile would suggest. Taste Atlas, the global food rating platform, ranked Albanian cuisine among the highest rated national cuisines in the world for several years running, and its national dish, Tave Kosi, was once ranked the single best traditional dish on the planet. That is an extraordinary claim for a cuisine most of the world has never encountered. Tave Kosi, the national dish, baked lamb and rice covered in a thick, tangy custard of yogurt and eggs, cooked until the top is golden and slightly set. It is hearty, comforting, and unlike anything else. The yogurt cuts through the richness of the lamb in a way that is deeply satisfying. It is also notably easy to make, which is part of why it has been a staple of Albanian home cooking for centuries. Its origins trace back to the Ottoman era. The city of Elbasan claims particular ownership of this dish, and eating it here in a traditional restaurant is often considered the definitive experience. Bayrek, layered phyllo pastry pies filled with spinach and cheese or minced meat or tomato and onion, found in every bakery across the country, eaten at any time of the day, priced so cheaply that it functions as the Albanian equivalent of a sandwich. There is something deeply comforting about a hot bayrek eaten standing up outside a tiny bakery on a cold morning. Every Albanian will tell you their mother bakes the best bayrek in Albania. Every Albanian is probably right. Fergese, a clay pot dish of roasted peppers and tomatoes baked with cheese, a fresh Albanian cottage cheese until it is thick and slightly caramelized. It is simple and extraordinary, described by food writers as the dish that proves Albanian cuisine is not just a diminished version of its neighbors' cooking, it is something genuinely its own. Kofte, grilled meatballs of minced lamb or beef seasoned with onion, garlic, mint, and oregano. Every culture in the broad Mediterranean to Central Asia belt has its own version of the spiced minced meat kebab, and Albania is distinctively good. The herbs giving it a freshness that lifts it above the standard. Raki, Albanian fruit brandy, distilled from grapes, mulberries, or plums. It is consumed with extraordinary frequency, offered to every guest, poured at every meal, drunk before breakfast in rural areas without apology. Albanian raki is clear, potent, and an unavoidable part of the social fabric. Refusing it is almost impossible without causing offense. Accepting it slowly in small sips, accompanied by good conversation, is one of the greatest pleasures of traveling in Albania. Trilache, three milk cake, a soft sponge soaked in a mixture of whole milk, condensed milk, and cream, topped with caramel, came to Albania via Turkey and has become one of the most beloved desserts in the country. Light, sweet, and dangerously easy to eat in large quantities. Albanian coffee deserves its own mention. Coffee, especially espresso, made strong and dark in the Italian style, consumed at a tiny table outside a cafe, is a central institution of Albanian social life. Albanians do not drink coffee quickly. They sit with it for an hour or 2 hours talking. The cafe is not a place to get a drink. It is a place to exist. Berat, called the city of a thousand windows, for the distinctive rows of large Ottoman-era windows that cover the facades of the white-walled houses stacked up the hillside above the Osom River. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site and one of the most beautifully preserved Ottoman towns in the Balkans. The castle at the top of the hill contains a working community. People live within these castle walls as they have for centuries. The Onufri Museum inside the castle houses an extraordinary collection of Byzantine icons painted by the Albanian master Onufri in the 16th century. His use of a brilliant luminous red made from a pigment he apparently invented is so distinctive that art historians call it Onufri red. Perat at sunset, with the light warming those thousand windows, is one of the great visual experiences of European travel. Girocaster, another UNESCO World Heritage Site, another extraordinary stone city. Girocaster is built on an impossibly steep hillside in the southern highlands, with a massive fortress looming above and narrow cobbled streets running between houses built from the same grey stone as the mountain itself. It is sometimes called the Stone City. It was the birthplace of both Enver Hoxha and Ismail Kadare. A remarkable fact that a city of this size produced both the dictator and his greatest literary critic. The ethnographic museum is housed in a traditional tower house of extraordinary grandeur. The bazaar, though small, is authentic in a way that tourist bazaars rarely are. The Albanian Riviera. The Ionian coastline from Vlore south to Sarande is one of the last stretches of undeveloped Mediterranean coastline in Europe. The beaches at Dermi, Himara, and Samil are world-class. Turquoise water, white pebbles, dramatic backdrops of limestone mountains. Samil, in particular, with its small offshore islands, has become famous. The prices are a fraction of comparable Greek or Croatian destinations. It will not stay this way forever. Butrint, near Sarande, this UNESCO World Heritage Site is one of the most complete and evocative ancient sites in Europe. A Greek colony founded in the 7th century BCE, later a Roman city. then Byzantine, then briefly Venetian. Butrint has layers of history compressed into a beautifully forested peninsula between a lake and the sea. A Roman theatre, a baptistry with extraordinary mosaic floors, Byzantine walls, a Venetian tower, all surrounded by trees and silence. It is extraordinary. The Accursed Mountains, Teth and Valbona in the far north, these glacially carved valleys offer some of the most dramatic mountain scenery in Europe. The famous peaks of the Balkans Trail crosses through this region, connecting northern Albania with Kosovo and Montenegro. The guest houses in Thet and Valbona are run by local families. Food is home cooked and the landscapes are untouched. This is Europe's last great frontier for mountain hikers. Tirana, the capital, is younger and more dynamic than any city its size has any right to be. The colored buildings, the bunk art museums built inside actual communist era nuclear bunkers, one for the regime's political history, one dedicated to the horrors of the Sigurumi secret police, the National History Museum with its famous socialist realist mosaic facade, the pyramid, Hoja's intended mausoleum, repurposed into a cultural and event space, the Grand Park, the cafes that stay open until 3 a.m. Tirana now is a city in the act of becoming itself. Albanian traditional music is one of the most distinctive in the world, and one of its forms has been recognized by UNESCO as an intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Isopolyphony. Isopolyphonic singing is a form of multi-part choral music found particularly in southern Albania, where groups of singers simultaneously sustain different melodic and drone parts without a conductor. The effect is haunting, strange, and deeply moving, multiple voices creating a sound that is more than the sum of its parts. It is ancient. Scholars believe its roots predate Christianity and Islam both, and it is unlike anything in the Western European musical tradition. Hearing it performed by a traditional ensemble in a village in southern Albania is an experience you don't forget. In the north, the epic ballad tradition, sung to the single-stringed lahuta, a traditional Albanian lute, preserves stories of heroism and honor, including ballads about Skanderbeg that have been passed orally for centuries. These epic songs are among the last living examples of an oral epic tradition that links back to the Homeric world. Contemporary Albanian music has, of course, been transformed by the arrival of pop. Dua Lipa and Bibi Rexha have brought Albanian identity to the global charts. But within Albania itself, a rich tradition of folk-influenced popular music called iso-polyphonic pop has developed. Contemporary music rooted in the ancient choral tradition. In visual art, Albania's most celebrated painter is probably Abdurrahim Buza, a 20th century master whose paintings of Albanian landscapes and peasant life are among the most treasured works in the National Gallery. And the icon painter, Onufri, already mentioned in connection with Berat, remains one of the great Byzantine tradition painters of the Balkans. In cinema, Albanian director George Giovanni has produced some of the most internationally recognized Albanian films. Albania has a passionate football culture. The national team, nicknamed the Kukiezinje, the Red and the Blacks, has punched above its weight in recent years, qualifying for UEFA Euro 2016 and Euro 2024. Individual Albanian footballers have played at the highest levels of European football. Players like Lorik Kana, who captained Albania for years while playing for Paris Saint-Germain and later Lazio, and the Xhaka brothers, Granit and Taulant, have both had long international careers. Weightlifting has historically been a strong sport for Albania, producing Olympic medalists in various competitions. Wrestling and traditional Highland sports, tests of strength, endurance, and skill that go back to the tribal traditions of the Accursed Mountains remain popular in northern communities. For most of the world, Albania barely registers. For those in Europe who know it, the image is still colored by the chaos of the 1990s. The pyramid scheme collapse, the civil disorder, the waves of migration. That image is decades out of date. The travelers who do make it to Albania, and their numbers are growing fast, almost universally come back saying the same things. The people are extraordinarily warm. The food is better than expected. The beaches rival Greece. The mountains rival Switzerland. The history is deeper and stranger and more interesting than anything they were prepared for. And the prices make them feel almost guilty. What Albania most wants the world to understand is that it is ancient, older in its continuous cultural identity than most European nations. That its isolation during the communist period left it strange and particular in ways that are now its greatest cultural asset. That a country which spent 46 years sealed from the world and then watched its savings evaporate in a pyramid scheme and then rebuilt itself from scratch in a generation is a country of remarkable resilience. There is a word in Albanian, shpirt, meaning spirit or soul. It is used to describe the essential quality of a person and also sometimes of Albania itself. The spirit of this country, its stubborn, generous, undefeated spirit, is the thing that visitors remember longest. Albania, 170,000 bunkers, built for an invasion that never came, scattered across some of the most beautiful beaches and mountains in Europe, slowly now becoming repurposed into cafes, into guest houses, into art spaces and museums, being turned piece by piece from monuments to fear into something that breathes. That is Albania in a metaphor. A country that has been through everything: conquest, isolation, paranoia, revolution, economic catastrophe, and is still here, still pouring coffee in outdoor cafes, still singing isopolyphonic harmonies in village squares, still offering raki to strangers and expecting them to stay for dinner. Next week, we cross the Mediterranean and head to North Africa for Algeria, the largest country in Africa by land area. Vast Saharan dunes that stretch to the horizon, ancient Roman ruins that rival anything in Italy, a folk music called Rai that swept from the streets of Oran to the clubs of Paris and the charts of the world, and a history that runs from Berber kingdoms to French colonialism, to a brutal civil war in the 1990s and out the other side. That's a big, complex, beautiful story. Monday at 7 p.m. Don't miss it. Please subscribe or follow the show on whatever platform you're listening on. It really does make a difference. Leave a rating if you can, and if you know someone who'd love this, please share it with them. I'm Ray. We've been to Albania, the Eagle's country. Proud, beautiful, and very much still standing.